Every single day, the value of your labor is being quietly siphoned away. You are working longer hours, producing more output, and generating more economic value than any generation in human history, yet you are mathematically poorer than your parents. This is not a glitch in the free market. This is the direct result of a structural redesign of the global monetary system that occurred on a very specific date. On August 15, 1971, the United States unilaterally suspended the convertibility of the US dollar into gold. With a single stroke of a pen, the Bretton Woods Agreement was terminated, and an era of unanchored fiat currency was inaugurated. Before this date, the global financial system was anchored by the Bretton Woods Agreement, established by 44 nations in 1944. Under that regime, the US dollar was convertible to gold at a fixed congressionally mandated price of $35 per troy ounce. The government could not infinitely print money without risking a severe depletion of physical gold reserves. But the US government wanted guns and butter. They wanted expansive domestic programs and military escalation in Vietnam. Between 1958 and 1971, the US gold supply was effectively cut in half. By 1971, the Treasury held approximately $10 billion in gold reserves against more than $60 billion in foreign dollar liabilities. A default was mathematically imminent. President Nixon severed the golden tether. The physical constraint on money creation was entirely removed. You were no longer earning money backed by a scarce asset. You were earning paper backed by the infinite printing capacity of the state. This transition established a permanent, inescapable framework designed to extract your wealth. To understand why you cannot afford to live, you must understand a principle discovered in the 1730s. It is called the Cantillon effect. Richard Cantillon, an Irish-French economist, identified a brutal reality about the creation of currency. When new money is printed, it does not distribute evenly across society. Instead, newly created money disproportionately benefits the entities positioned closest to the issuance of credit. Cantillon observed that if a nation discovered a new gold mine, the miners and mine owners would possess the newly extracted wealth first. They would spend this newfound money on goods and services at existing pre-inflationary price levels. They captured a massive increase in real purchasing power. But as this new money circulated outward, it systematically bid up the prices of food, housing, and labor. By the time the new money reached the laborers and wage earners at the periphery of the economy, prices had already skyrocketed. These individuals suffered a massive loss of purchasing power before their incomes could ever adjust. They essentially paid a hidden tax to subsidize the consumption of the first receivers. In our modern economy, the Cantillon effect operates with terrifying institutional precision. The Federal Reserve injects trillions in new liquidity directly into the apex of the financial system. The primary beneficiaries are the government, primary dealers, commercial banks, large corporate borrowers, and private equity firms. These elite institutions receive the new base money first. They use this infinite liquidity to purchase financial assets and originate loans before the broader market prices can fully adjust. You, the middle-class wage earner, are positioned as the last receiver. You experience the Cantillon effect as a persistent, crushing increase in the cost of consumer goods, housing, and healthcare long before your wages ever go up. This invisible mechanism completely broke the contract between American labor and American prosperity. In the decades preceding the 1971 Nixon shock, the economy was remarkably symmetrical. As the macroeconomy expanded, the financial gains were broadly distributed. From the end of World War II through the early 1970s, labor productivity and inflation-adjusted hourly compensation grew in near lockstep. When a worker produced more value, they received more pay. Then came the fiat standard, and a profound decoupling emerged. Net productivity continued an aggressive upward trajectory over the next 5 decades, but hourly compensation for the vast majority of workers flatlined in real terms. By the end of 2022, the accumulated difference between labor productivity growth and real wage growth approached an astonishing 70%. You are generating massive amounts of wealth, but the fiat monetary architecture ensures that you do not reap the rewards. This is not an abstract theory. It is a measurable theft of human time. Studies analyzing the total U.S. economy from 1973 to 2016 demonstrate that a 1 percentage point higher productivity growth rate is associated with only a 0.4 to 0.7 percentage point increase in worker compensation. If the pre-1971 correlation between productivity and income had been maintained, research estimates suggest that the bottom 90% of workers would have earned an additional $3.9 trillion in the year 2023 alone. Over the past half-century, this amounts to a cumulative missing wealth transfer of roughly $79 trillion. $79 trillion extracted from the hands of the working class and funneled directly to the owners of financial assets. You produce more value than any generation in history, only to receive a progressively smaller slice of the macroeconomic pie. To obscure this systemic wage stagnation, the fiat regime weaponizes a psychological phenomenon known as the money illusion. Workers are trained to view their wealth in nominal terms rather than real, inflation-adjusted terms. Your paycheck has a bigger number on it, but the underlying purchasing power of that currency has been systematically hollowed out. Look at the brutal mathematics of currency debasement. Between 1913 and 1971, a 58-year period containing 2 world wars and the Great Depression, the price of a standard basket of consumer goods rose approximately 400%. But from 1971 to 2020, a 49-year period devoid of global total war, the cost of the exact same basket of goods increased by roughly 650%. Since the tether to gold was severed in 1971, the US dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. A median income that rose nominally from $49,276 in 2010 to $70,784 in 2021 looks like a massive 43.6% increase. In reality, it represented a far more pathetic growth of slightly less than 16% in inflation-adjusted terms. Even worse, the official inflation metrics you see on the news are structurally manipulated. The government continually alters the methodology utilized to calculate the consumer price index. They use substitution bias. If beef becomes too expensive due to inflation, the index assumes you will just buy cheaper poultry, entirely masking the reality that your standard of living has been forcibly downgraded. They use hedonic quality adjustments to mathematically lower the recorded price of goods on paper, even when you pay more at the cash register. If the algorithm from 1980 were utilized today, reported inflation rates would be significantly higher. The system intentionally obscures the true extent of currency debasement, so you will just keep working more hours just to tread water. While your consumer currency is relentlessly depleted, the newly printed fiat money naturally gravitates toward finite, yield-generating assets. This generates rampant asset price inflation. The most socially destructive example is the complete annihilation of the American housing market. For the middle class, homeownership was the bedrock of financial stability. Prior to 1971, the cost of a typical single-family home was deeply tethered to local median wages. Under a fiat regime, housing transitioned into a highly financialized, speculative asset class. In 1985, the median U.S. household earned an annual income of $23,620, while the median cost of a new home was $82,800. The home price-to-income ratio was approximately 3.5. By 2025, the median nominal income had risen to roughly $83,150, but the median sales price for an American home surged past $416,000. The national ratio is now 5.0. In heavily populated coastal areas, the math is totally disconnected from reality. The median home price in Los Angeles is 12.5 times the median household income. It is 10.5 times in San Jose and 9.8 times in New York. In the 1970s, a first-time buyer couple could save an average deposit of 5% in under a year. Today, saving a 20% deposit requires nearly 4 years of strict capital retention. Banks and private equity firms use unlimited central bank credit to acquire single-family real estate, bidding up prices against retail buyers who rely on stagnant wages. The same hyperinflation destroyed higher education. In 1971, a 4-year education at a private college cost $2,930 per year. By 2021, the average cost surged to $51,690. As the government expanded guaranteed student loans, universities absorbed the newly printed money by relentlessly hiking tuition prices. The ultimate consequence of the post-1971 framework is the hyper-financialization of the entire American economy. Under the gold standard, robust economic growth relied on industrial output, manufacturing, and long-term capital investment. Unconstrained fiat money radically altered corporate incentives. The financial sector began to capture an ever-increasing share of national income. In 1950, financial services contributed merely 2.8% to U.S. GDP. By 1980, it reached 4.9%, and by 2006, it escalated to 8.3%. Central banks suppressed interest rates, lowering the cost of borrowing for massive corporations. Corporate executives realized it was easier to engage in financial engineering than to build actual products. They issue low-interest debt to repurchase their own shares, artificially inflating the stock price. The profitability of American enterprise became detached from tangible production, rendering the traditional middle-class manufacturing base functionally obsolete. This financialization breeds profound moral hazard. The banking sector became structurally too big to fail. During the 2008 Great Financial Crisis and the 2020 global lockdowns, central banks resorted to massive multi-trillion-dollar bailouts. They created new reserves out of thin air to recapitalize the banks. This instantly socialized the catastrophic losses of the financial elite while preserving their wealth. When the Federal Reserve injects liquidity, hedge funds and primary dealers instantly secure their positions and bid up equity markets. Meanwhile, the general public is left to face the latent consumer inflation. In the Cantillon economy, the institutions serving capital function flawlessly, while the institutions serving labor are allowed to decay. We are now living in a system of universal debt slavery. Under a gold standard, wealth was accumulated by producing more than you consumed and saving the surplus. Under the fiat standard, holding positive cash balances is a financially ruinous strategy. Because central banks intentionally target inflation, your savings are continuously debased. Being rich no longer means having large reserves of currency. It signifies owing vast amounts of fiat-denominated debt. The winners in this system acquire hard assets with borrowed money and pay back the debt in the future with depreciated dollars. This paradigm mathematically engineers an extreme concentration of wealth. Between 1983 and 2016, the share of aggregate U.S. wealth held by upper-income families increased to 79%, while the middle-class share plummeted to 17%. By the 2020s, the wealthiest 10% of American households controlled roughly 70% of total household wealth. The bottom 50% held a meager 2.5%. If you invested $100 in the S&P 500 in 1970, it grew to $22,419 by 2023. If you held cash, you lost your future. The fiat architecture fundamentally alters human time preference. When individuals know their money will be worth less tomorrow, they are incentivized to consume immediately rather than save and invest. This system is not malfunctioning. It is performing its exact intended function. It circumvents the limitations of transparent taxation. Through the monetization of debt, the government finances unfunded liabilities and global empire by stealthily expropriating the stored labor of the working class. The victims are the wage earners furthest from the money spigot. The game is entirely rigged, the mathematics are mathematically irreversible, and the transfer of your wealth is permanent.